we speak about conversion. Many people tend to think about like a moment of conversion rather than the constant and ongoing conversion that God calls us to each and every single day of our lives. When you're so actively involved in trying to bring about this conversion in other people's lives, um, how do you attend to your own need for conversion on a daily basis?
I personally have what I call my non-negotiables. So non-negotiables as a priest, like I say mass every single day. I pray the liturgy of the hours, which is the divine office, which are several prayers that we have to pray throughout the day. I'm committed to spending 2 hours every day in front of the Blessed Sacrament to be in the presence of our Lord and to allow Him to, be my all and my everything. I try to live a life of penance and discipline, asceticism. Uh, I would say those are like my non-negotiables. Those are the things like I have to be doing these things if I want to be doing what I want other people to be doing. I need to myself be living that life of radical holiness if I want to call other people to being disciples and followers of the Lord.
So we all experience seasons in our spirituality. Um, when you get stalled in your own spirituality and you still have to wake up every day and serve people um, in their pain and in their need, what do you do when you feel like you're stalled spiritually?
For me, it's going back to the fundamentals. So that list that I just gave right there would be my first question. Okay, like if I'm not where I'm at, is that because one of these things is missing that I have found to be tried and true ways and means for me to be the priest, the saint that God is calling me to be. So I look back at that, but also with the sense of, okay, is God inviting me to something new at this moment? Is there another way or a different something that I should be doing right now in my life that I wasn't doing before? Yeah.
And do you look back on times where you felt like you were stalled spiritually and realize, okay, no, I wasn't stalled spiritually. God was doing something new. God was doing something different. I just didn't have the frame of reference to recognize it.
Yeah. So clearly, one of the principles of the spiritual life is that when things don't seem to be going great, where there isn't great consolation, where there isn't a lot of maybe grace that's felt or experienced, those are your growth points. This is why I love coaching, is because it's the exact same. You can't train the human body without putting that human body through pain and through suffering and through toil. But also, if we look at how the body ultimately conditions, bodies plateau. But then to get to that next level, something needs to happen to be able to push the human body to the next level. But plateaus are part of how people's training regimen happens. And so the same is true in the spiritual life. There's times where things may seem really, 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 really bland or really, really dull, or I feel far away from God. But often, not often, those are the moments where God is clearly very close to you.
How is being a priest different to what you expected?
In many ways, it matches up. If we go back to the original dream, I want to become a priest because I want to convert Catholics to love the Lord. It matches up so beautifully. And like that was the original desire, that was the aspiration. When I look at the means of how that happens, I see like it's very different than what I expected. Like for me, that often happens through celebration of the sacraments, perpetual adoration. Uh, those were things that like would have never originally been on my checklist. Even after I had my reversion in seminary, I don't think I had a clue. I think at that point, then it was very focused on the liturgy. Like I'm going to save the church because my vestments are awesome and because I celebrate mass perfectly. And I quickly realized that that is good and just, but it is so much more about relationships and the entering into through preaching, through catechesis, but also just being with people is what brings about conversion and renewal.
What do you think the biggest challenge facing priests and pastors are in the modern world?
You just asked one of my favorite questions. I would say one of the biggest challenges in the priesthood right now is that there is a lack of an identity as the priest as father. I think that there has been a lot of really good books and a lot of great work being done in seminary about how a priest is a pastor and a shepherd, a servant, how a priest is even an administrator. And we get books on these things, on a whole toolbox of things that we can have in our toolbox so we can be great administrators. When it comes down to it, like, I'm a father. Like, that's what everyone calls me, but we don't talk about what does it mean for a priest to be a father. And my greatest inspiration as a priest, besides the saints, I've actually been very committed, lay, faithful men who are just amazing fathers. And I look often at my life and I look at the radical difference that often exists in the life of a priest and the life of a committed father. And you just see this huge chasm, like, I live by myself. I sleep by myself. My food is cared for. If there's a problem in my house, I make one phone call and someone is going to come and fix that. My car is taken care of. My groceries are taken care of. I am required to go on a 5-day silent retreat every single year that's paid for by the church. When I look at the life of a priest, of a father who has 5, 6, 7, 8, I have parishioners in my parish that have 11 children. They don't get a good night's rest. No one comes and fixes their house. No one's buying them groceries. And for them, a vacation is going to Disneyland, which is like not a vacation for any man. And I look at the radical difference when it comes to a life of sacrifice or a life of just routine, and I see that there's a void. And so I have tried to do all that I can to learn from the good fathers, my own father, other laymen in my life, but also like the saintly men that I've seen that have really espoused fatherhood in their priesthood. And that's been my inspiration. And I really do think it's the crisis that we see very much so in the priesthood today, is a lack of masculinity, a lack of commitment, a lack of being all in, a lack of seeing every one of my parishioners as my child that I'm called to lay down my life for. And looking at priesthood in that way is a game changer.
St John Vianney is the patron saint of parish priests. And how has John Vianney influenced you? How would you like to see him influence the priesthood going forward?
You keep asking really good questions. So there was a point in my seminary career where I looked around at brother seminarians. I looked around on priests that I had encountered, and a lot of despair set in of what is this? And I kept looking at Jesus in the scriptures, and I kept looking at the radical call. And I had the opportunity to spend a summer with St Francis of Assisi in Assisi one summer. And I actually made the decision to leave diocesan seminary and to become a Franciscan. And my spiritual director, out of obedience, said, you need to stay. You can't leave for a year. But I literally gave all my clothes away. I was sleeping on the floor. I'm going to be St. Francis. Like, this is the gospel. Like, these are people who are living radical lives. Like, I want to do this. And instead, everyone seems to be living this soft, cushy life in the seminary. And then I met St. John Vianney. And I met a priest, a diocesan priest, a parish priest who lived a radical life of conversion, who gave everything to his parishioners, who was devoted to the confessional, who loved our Blessed Mother and the Eucharist. And that was his whole entire life. He didn't need all these other things to make him happy. He didn't need, a day off or a cabin or luxury cars, or he didn't need anything because he had Jesus. And he just wanted to give Jesus to other people. That's all he wanted to do. And he was willing to just be a martyr in the confessional for that. And he opened an orphanage for young children. So I read this biography and I was like, okay, I found my hero. I found who I want to be as my model. I realized I'm not St John Vianney. I will never be St John Vianney, and I can't. And we all need to be the saint that God is calling us to be. However, he then really became my model. People often will say to me, like, what priests were really great influences in your life when you were in seminary or when you were a young kid? And I hate saying this, but like, I didn't have any. It's one of the reasons why when I was a sophomore in college, it was so easy for me to walk. And I didn't have priest heroes. And St. John Vianney quickly became my priest hero. And I think he sets forth a really high bar and a really high standard. But nothing in life will ever bring you contentment unless you're striving for greatness. Even if it's greatness in holiness or greatness in being a priest, like you find your joy in striving and giving your all. No marriage is going to be happy if a husband or wife is just like, yeah, I'm just kind of here just to do what I'm doing. And so I've just found great joy in doing all I can to study about him and learn about him. So I actually wrote a master's thesis about him when I was my last year of seminary. I've been to Ars, thanks be to God, 6 times. Did a silent retreat there that changed my life when a decision had to be made about an adjustment in my ministry. And I was the director of youth ministry for the archdiocese, and I did 11-day silent retreat there, and then I've been in full-time parish ministry since then, and transitioned out of the office of youth ministry. And he's my man. I love him.
Why do you think his example gets rejected, not only today, but 20 years ago, 50 years ago?
I think it's because they don't really know the man. I think people read the paragraph version of his life, which only talks about sitting in the confessional and loving the Eucharist and doing physical mortifications, and they don't know the man. I mean, I love St. John Vianney because he is, like, any aspect of the priesthood you want to look for, it's really there. The man founded an orphanage. And the man fed starving children. And so when we sometimes look in the church, we see these divisions about you have these people that love the liturgy and love the sacraments, but what about the social justice issues? And what about the poor? No, Vianney was all over it. And the two of them fed each other so beautifully. And that's the part that I love about it. It's a beautiful integration, but I think it's so easy just to reduce people. And we do it all the time in our world right now with Snapchat and Instagram and Facebook and social media. We reduce people down to a paragraph or one picture, and we don't know the whole person.
Yeah.
If people study Vianney, you will see a man who is fully alive, and that's attractive.